The Runescape economy is one of the most volatile markets in video games, and that is because it has so many different items and they're constantly being rejigged to what is useful and what isn't. And so we're going to have a look at some of the most influential and nostalgic items that were released in Runescape and how they've differed over time. And of course, we'll start with probably one of the most controversial items that was introduced into RuneScape, which is the bond. And if you invested some money into bonds just 10 years ago, you would have been able to make an insane amount of money, and they're one of the biggest increases in price that we've seen to date. And so far we can have a look at exactly how much they've increased, and we're using the RS Wikis exchange to be able to see the history of all of the items that we're going to be looking at today. And hopefully it'll be an interesting one for you guys to recoup or rekindle some of your memories of some of the items we're going to have a look through. And of course maybe we'll make a part 2 later on down the line. But the bond, of course, a way of being able to basically buy money in the game to avoid all of the bot farms, I guess, and of course gold selling websites and RuneScape's way of making more money off of us from literally introducing their own bot farms, except they don't have to do them. Anyway, what you're seeing here is the graph of the bond over time, and they were released in September in 2013. It's now basically 10 and a bit years on from when they were first released in the game, and so you can see the difference in price between then versus now, and we'll compare that against some of the other items that we've got in this video. But when they were originally released, 6 million is what they cost, and they costed about 6 million to 8 million depending on the time of year until essentially basically the October of 2014. So they were about 6 million for a year, where they were very stagnant, not really increasing in price. And it wasn't really until you saw the introduction of 2015, where noxious scythes and stuff started coming into the game, and where items started getting exponentially more expensive, and the increase of basically high-level monsters and stuff bringing in more gold into the game, whereby people had more gold to spend on things like bonds to be able to pay for membership and save themselves some money, or real money, by showing that their enthusiasm into the game is able to pay for the bonds. Now, I'd rather just pay the £3 or whatever for 2 weeks of membership, but that's just down to me. But either way, you're seeing here the massive jump, and you can see between 2013 in about 5-year period, bonds tripled in price on average, and then they've been going absolutely crazy within the last basically 2 years, since of course COVID and the of course everything to do with that. They skyrocketed, where everyone was playing indoors, most likely spamming memberships, playing multiple accounts, driving up the the amount of accounts being using the bonds and stuff like that. Things like Fresh Start Worlds boosting up the price, and they've just not really ever started coming back down. They did have a little dip in August this year, but then they're back up to like 80 million. I actually bought a couple the other day, which was like I think I sold them for 86 million. So yeah, you can see the difference in price in a 10-year period, basically 15xing. So if you bought a ton of bonds in 2013, you would be insanely rich right now. And when you compared it against how much kind of GP you were able to obtain per hour versus now, it's probably not 10 times more, which is absolutely crazy. So you could have made money by just spending all of your gold on bonds back then. But of course, hindsight's a beautiful thing, and we never really knew how much the market was going to explode. And talking about gold going to explode, we can have a look at some of the common trade index. And this is basically RuneScape's way of being able to, or a way of analyzing the grand exchange market to see what the general price of items is over time, based on the Dow Jones index, of course, in real life. But what you see here is in 2009, when this was first introduced, we were able to see the common trade index being 113. Compare that to today's value, we are at 188 or 187.94 as of the recording of this video. So basically an extra 70% higher than what it was back then, which means that on average, everything has gone up by about 70%. And basically that doesn't necessarily mean the prices, but in general, kind of the index of the entire game. So some things will go up, some things will go down, and yeah, some things will go absolutely skyrocketing. But talking more about some of the things that we saw back in the day, well, we have the Abyssal Whip, one of the most iconic kind of items in the game, probably up there in probably the top 5 if you played RuneScape back in the day. But if we have a look at the all-time price, I remember paying about 3 million or something like that back in the day to be able to pick up a whip. And they went all the way up to 4 million per whip, which was crazy. And when you consider how much they're worth now, and after the massive collapse in 2013, costing now only about 70,000 GP, and they've stayed so stagnant based on basically the AUK value of the Abyssal Whip. They are basically discard. Most people will just high AUK them for money. There is literally no real reason to buy the whip anymore, and it is no longer anywhere near a meta item within the game. But it was crazy to see how big of a price difference it was. Yeah, really, really amazing, and it really brings you back seeing some of these prices. And I guess we can have a look at some of the other ones that we have. Well, the Noxious Scythe, for example, starting off back in 2015 or 2014, at 400 mil. I remember when it was actually released, dropping down massively within, the first year, basically, as more and more of them come into the game, and then slowly been on the rise ever since, finding a period a bit of stagnation, which is where basically everything seemed to go down in like 2018, and then of course the influence of COVID once again rising prices to where they are about now, where they're looking at about 300 million, seeing some high points with like 400 million, almost reaching the top price when it was first released almost 10 years ago now, which is crazy to think. And yeah, definitely an item that was very overpowered back in the day and somewhat good now. But we can have a look at the Noxious Scythe, similar sort of story, except this one hasn't had so much volatility. It's been basically, it wasn't the most meta when it was first released. You saw a gradual decline. Mage became somewhat, okay, but nothing absolutely crazy. You had the introduction of the Staff of Sliske as well, which probably didn't help with the buying of things like Noxious Staff, as it wasn't best in stock at the time. And then you've seen it increase in price ever since, and actually is one of the highest, and looking at about 250 million, putting it very close to the Scythe, which is kind of crazy because back in the day the Scythe was about twice the price of the Staff and the Bow. So a nice little one where we can see the big difference, and I bought it back when it was about 120 mil or something like that, so probably at the lowest point, which is interesting, and now worth basically triple, which is why buying items is sometimes one of the best investments that you can do in the game, rather than just having a cash stack, especially if you go AFK for a while. But jumping back in time, all the way back to when the Dragon Claws became one of the most interesting kind of items in the game and were worth about 40 million. One of my friends actually had one of these. I wasn't so lucky because back when I was about 10, I was probably not the smartest of kids and probably thought that doing unicows was one of the best ways of making money. It took me about a month to save up to be able to afford a Saradomin sword, of which I went into PvP, died with it, and then end up getting very, very angry, as you can probably expect from a 10-year-old who's just lost everything for a month's worth of work. But yeah, not the best of ideas getting stun locked in Lumbridge when you accidentally went onto a PvP world. That was one of the lowest points of my career, but there we go. Anyway, the Dragon Claws starting off at about 40 million GP. Was able to maintain that price for quite a while. Obviously you can't see past 2009 unfortunately with some of the items, and 2007 is often where you can't see any further back. But the Dragon Claw was very, very meta item back in the day, useful for PvP. I'm pretty sure you all know all about Dragon Claws. And then the ultimate sacrifice of Dragon Claws, where they basically became unusable, where they split them from being dual-handed claws into single-handed claws with an offhand variant, which, literally 10 times less in price within a matter of 2 months after they did that. So now worth even lower, looking at like 70k for a Dragon Claw, and then obviously making a little bit of a resurgence in the last couple of years due to the Essence of Finality, where you can use the special, which is a little bit handy. But that is basically why it kind of jumped up in price from my own knowledge. But Dragon Claws, yet again, crazy to see the difference in price. I mean, you went from 40 million GP, in where GP was absolutely getting 40 mil was very, very difficult, to the point at which it was worth 80,000 GP, and the disparity between these two in terms of the time zone and the the cumulative interest on how much 40 million GP could have been in today's term, you're looking at like probably 0.001% the price of what it actually was. So that is mad. And then we can move on to one of the more kind of interesting items, and I remember not actually buying one of these when I could have done. And let's just say I regretted every single moment of it, and it was the Black Santa hat. This was an item obtainable during the 15 Days of Christmas mini event, starting on of December 2013, ending on the 3rd of January, and basically you had to pull a festive cracker, etc. They were worth 266 million GP at the time in January. They then dropped a little bit down to about 200, and then have been on the rise ever since, where they made a bit of a surge within like 2016, ended up being like a 1.8 bill, and then reached their max price about 2017, November time in 2017, leading up to Christmas, I guess, and then of course stayed at that until of course the release of basically the new max cash stack, where we can now see the official price of the Black Santa hat sitting at around 21 billion GP. So you would have made an increase of 100x if you bought it in 2013, which let's just say maybe I should have spent the 200 mil then, as I would be like 7 times richer right now than I currently am just from buying one item. Not the best non-investment that I made. But either way, let's have a look at the standard Santa hat. Of course, this one being the iconic, able to be purchased for 15 million in 2008 when it was released, or near then, and of course then been rising ever since, all the way up to 3.3 billion is what you can buy it at right now, and you can buy it straight off the Grand Exchange, which is actually cheaper than I thought it was going to be. But I guess it's less of a iconic. I guess it's iconic, but it doesn't necessarily have the prestige that the Black Santa hat has, or maybe it just doesn't look as cool, which is why people want the black over the standard. And then let's have a look at the Halloween masks. These are basically all various different prices, or based around the same sort of price. But back in June 2008, you could pick one up for 11 million. Now 2.2 billion, which means that if you bought one of these back in the day, you'd be looking at about a 200 times increase in the price of these. But, hindsight's a wonderful thing, and they really made a massive surge in November 2020, I guess. I don't know, maybe with the release of some of the other treasure hunter items and stuff like that. And mad to see such an increase within just literally 1 year, or 6 months even. Or maybe an entire year went up by 4 times. It's absolutely mad. But I'll be interested to see what you guys think. But I think one of the biggest things that I remember back in the day was seeing the Armadillo Godsword. This was like the ultimate goal to be able to actually get within RuneScape, and if you had one of these, you're an absolute chad, because of course God Wars Dungeon 1 released, and we had the introduction of the Armadillo Godsword sitting at around 100 million GP, which, if you considered the average training method back then, probably made you about 3 million an hour, maybe, if you were absolutely cracked. Having one of these, just crazy. And of course, there weren't any real guides back in the day, so you couldn't just, go on the internet and be like, oh, what's a good training method? You had to work it out yourself, or find them, or know someone that actually knew them, because you didn't have as many guides and stuff like that you had readily available. So yeah, knowing what to do was a bit of a pain. And of course, most people were a lot younger back then, so a little bit naive and probably not the smartest of people. So yeah, and now we see it dropping to about 7 million from the 122 million maximum that we saw this thing at. So yeah, it was a mad time to see the Armadillo Godsword go from one of the best to probably one of the things that never ever gets used, and probably more so used for components or something like that at the moment. So yeah, I don't think anyone's going to be shouting in chat about getting one of these if they pick one up in God Wars Dungeon 1 now. But either way, we can move on to the Dragon Dagger. Yes, once again another iconic item. It's sat around 30,000, and you see it now down at like 16,000, which is crazy to think how much it's gone down. It's basically halved in price. You saw a huge drop within basically a couple of months. You saw it go down by literally half, and it's been basically the same price ever since, most likely down to the fact it's at discard or alchable value, so you don't really have any profit to be made or anything like that. So yeah, Dragon Dagger in there for you as well. And then yeah, basically I thought we'd have a look at material prices. So you have things like oak logs, for example, which back in the day in 2008 would cost you a whopping 30 GP. Wow, what a bargain. But now sitting at around 868, and of course with the release of kind of construction methods and the changes in construction that we've had over the past couple of years and stuff like that, you've seen them increase in price. And of course with various different things requiring them and various different training methods and stuff like that, logs and stuff like that has just basically gone flying through the roof. And we've seen them go from like 100 to now like 10xing within the space of a couple of years. So this is where you can make insane amounts of money, and you'll find that like if you are smart about what you think is going to go up in price, you can generally make a lot of money over time. And if you're not completely brain dead, you can use some of the trends and stuff like that to make easy money. Now, one thing that you will probably know about is spirit shards, one of the most easily obtainable mass-produced items that you can buy in the game, which is why they hold their price very, very well and why you see very little changes in what they do. But one of the biggest things about spirit shards is that people do sometimes use them to trade, and whereby they are able to mass buy a ton of spirit shards. I am talking about millions of spirit shards, maybe even hundreds of millions of spirit shards, spending billions of GP to be able to get these things. And then what happens is they wait and hold on to them until they see the price drop by 1 GP. And when they drop by 1 GP, they'll buy a load of them. And then of course, when they go back up to a standard amount, they will then sell them. Now you might think, oh, they've gone down by like 3 GP. That's actually a 15% return if you sold them the following month. So you could have been able to make a whopping 15% on however much money you wanted to actually put in it, which is pretty good in a short period of time, as they only drop for, a month or so. So it's a way people can actually flip these things, and they're very, very kind of steady. You're not really going to be seeing any dramatically crazy kind of drops in stuff like that. And it was actually mad to see them down at 21 in May in 2021, and of course making a surge back up to the standard price of 24, and they basically stay there for a long time. But you never know, if you see them drop down, maybe you want to purchase some just to make a little bit of money when you see them go back up in price. But that's down to you, and of course maybe you can make more money over time. Now, yeah, we can have a look at a variety of other items, and one of them is the party hats. I don't think it would be a market watch, I guess, or a look at some of the crazy economics that are in the game unless we actually had a look at the party hats. Now, back in 2008, now party hats were released way before 2008, and you could get them for free but they were obviously tradable, so you could purchase and buy them and sell them and do whatever you wanted to do. And of course, if you were able to, collect a ton of party hats, they were dropped, I think, by like a mod within the game, so you could basically go around and you'd be able to pick up loads of them. You could have potentially had tens of them, 40, 50 different party hats in your account if you were playing at the time that they were released. However, over time, of course, they were never re-released, which makes them a rare item and of course never obtainable just through playing the game. And so in order to get them, you had to go to one of those people that actually picked up one of those items back in the day, 20 years ago now nearly. In fact, 20 years ago. So yeah, to be able to actually get one is very, very difficult. And of course, if you do want one, you have to pay the premium tax, which is at the moment 32 billion GP, which is going to take you a buttload of time. If you actually want to be able to pick one of these things up, you're probably going to have to spend 1,000 hours playing one of the most kind of insane bosses to be able to actually afford one of these, which means playing a lot of days constantly doing the best monetary thing in the game right now to be able to afford one of these, or getting super lucky in some of your clue scrolls and stuff repeatedly. So yeah, it's kind of crazy how expensive some of these are. And of course, they don't always reflect the actual price that we see here, and sometimes they're actually higher, sometimes they're lower, and maybe they just weren't actually sold on the day, which is why you see them slightly change price. But it's nice to see them in the game and actually available to check how much they're worth, because it's staggering, some of these prices. But I'll be interested to see your thoughts. Of course, these were only a few items over the course of RuneScape's history, and we've been able to see how much of an impact some of the changes that we've seen over the years, and how versatile and volatile kind of the RuneScape community is, but also how crazy changes that Jagex made, maybe indirectly to some of the items, can make a massive difference in how much they cost. It was an interesting one for me to look at, and hopefully you've enjoyed at least watching it and joining me along whilst we've reviewed some of these items. And if you want to see some more stuff like this, then let me know in the comment section down below. But if you want to see more RuneScape content, guides and series that we're going to be doing shortly, then subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you there. Goodbye, have a great rest of the day.